Oh my god, I'm trying to tell myself stop being anxious about doing the thing. The thing being filming this video. And do the thing. Hello YouTube, I am Hazel. I'm going to talk some today about retraumatization in the context of PTSD and especially dissociative identity disorder as well, and my personal experience and just some thoughts on recovering and moving forward from that. I'm talking with my hands a lot today. It's helping me think though, so hopefully it's not too distracting. Retraumatization is generally defined as a reminder of trauma, be it either conscious or subconscious, and it results in the traumatized person re-experiencing the trauma in some way, like a flashback or like emotionally being back in that position. It's more likely to happen during times of intense stress, but that it doesn't necessarily mean that you have to have gone through another trauma. Unfortunately, many people who have been through trauma may experience multiple instances of it throughout their lifetimes, sometimes and often even as a result of the first situation. Some good examples can be people who've experienced any sort of child abuse, and it can lead to them being for any combination of reasons in other situations, whether it be they're having a difficult time moving forward because of their PTSD, whether it be because they are back in vulnerable situations again, and especially because a lot of people, fall into patterns or they don't know who to look for out of safe people. It's never the person who's being abused's fault that they're being re-traumatized and re-abused. But a lot of times that situation and that kind of mindset that people end up in can lead to more toxic situations. There's countless examples that, I honestly don't even need to go into for sake of triggers. But the cycle of trauma can be really hard for a lot of people to get out of in the context of further abuse. And even when you're not in a cycle of toxicity or things like that, sometimes bad things can just happen and it can be really hard to get out of because of prior PTSD and other traumas. A good example is that the area that I live in can sometimes be a little stressful at this point in time. Most notably in the context of retraumatization is things like overhearing neighbors yelling at each other or violence, things like that. Financially, I don't have a car and, we can't currently just up and move out, also for financial reasons. And I have, my own very long-winded opinion on just that concept and, how I wish we could have more of an outpouring of community resources. As it stands, it's kind of one of those things where your fight or flight response is kicked in all the time and you can't leave, but of course fighting is not going to help anybody in this situation. And for a lot of people who've been through other instances of trauma or chronic stress, anything like that, you often find yourself falling into some other options, between fight or flight. There can also be things like freeze or fawn. Fawn being befriending the perpetrator of the harm, and freeze being, there's nothing else I can do, I guess I can just kind of go into the void. That's a pretty common thing for people with dissociative disorders or PTSD. So recently they were doing some renovations on another house in our complex. My partner and I were watching TV and we were about to head to bed. So the house exploded. There was this big loud boom, that it shook our house. You could feel it was like it jarred, it was jarring. I was kind of sitting by the window at the time and that actually cracked. The force of the other house exploding was enough to crack the window that I was sitting next to. So you hear that going on next to you. We at first didn't know what was going on. It took about, a couple minutes to be like, whoa, should I even go outside right now? What on earth? When finally you look and, I get outside and it's like, oh, okay, so the neighbor's house exploded. At first we were like, how about we just, we flight, we evacuate the area. That's what's safest right now. Is everyone okay? Get the pets together, get the people together. But the way our street is set up, that wasn't an option. The firefighters actually wouldn't let us leave because everyone past that house would have had to pass by the house that was still pouring out gas or whatever it caused it. It was in ways less safe. So flight's not an option. Who's gonna help to fight anything? There's nothing really here to befriend, to fawn. So what are you gonna do? In that moment, all the neighbors are like, whoa, many of them are freaking out, and I'm a little freaking out too. There was not much more that it felt like I could do in the moment besides freeze. And at that point in time, my partner was very amazing, and they kind of were able to get me out of my own head a little, and get both of us, kind of at least prioritize, get a plan to get us all safe. We kind of tried to hang out as far away from everything going on as we could. We were trying to work out turning off our gas and stuff in the house. In a lot of ways, I had to snap into being put together. It was life or death, it felt. Or at least it felt like at the time. Luckily the fire didn't spread that far and didn't actually get to our house. It was not a next door neighbor, but it was close enough to be dangerous. So following that, the house actually, the firefighters were here, they got the fire down, they were like, all right, you're all safe, it's all good to go. And by that point we were like, all right, no, I think we're good. I'm gonna put our guards down. Trying to go to bed, but it rekindled. I don't know what was going on, if it was still gas, if it was still just there were a couple embers or what, but it rekindled. And this had initially happened before bedtime, and then it happened again. The wee hours in the morning, I don't even remember at this point. And so, of course, I'm like, oh crap, gotta get back up, gotta get the cats back in their carrier, and at this point gotta get the hamsters ready. And then at that point I realized Gizmo, my hamster, I love my hamsters, so I have multiple. Gizmo had gotten out of his cage. And it was just this whole mess all over again. We had just gotten our brains down to safety, like, okay, firefighters said we're safe. And they said we don't need to evacuate, it's under control. And we weren't. And by that point, I was like, okay, Gizmo's escaped, oh my god, and this was time 2. And the fire department came back out and got it down again. And so we're like, okay, well, go back to bed, I guess. We'll be fine. And at that point I wasn't really able to. I just ended up staying up. I was on edge for the rest of the night. I was ready to go. I was ready to, run, basically. I was ready to fly, ready to go again in case we need to. I wish we could have at this point gotten out, but at this point we weren't able to drive safely away, due to exhaustion and ugh. So my partner tries to go back to bed and I'm just like, all right, I'm gonna sit here and I'm gonna be ready with my cats and with my one hamster. The other one is somewhere in the house, who even knows where, but I'm just gonna sit there by the door. And I think that's very significant of essentially what a PTSD brain just is doing all the time. I think that that's something that when you've gone through a trauma, your brain is always trying to be ready to keep yourself safe if you have to go through it again. And then finally, sun comes up a couple hours into the real morning. I was just barely starting to kind of doze back off. It rekindles again. At that point, after they get it out, we're like, okay, firefighters are letting us leave now. We are out of here. Our community was absolutely amazing at this point in time. There was a very dear friend who, at the time, they were very new to us. We had just met them within the community that we had been engaging with. Was a local trans group. This friend, they let us stay with them. They let us bring our kitties. They let us bring the hamsters. We all crashed there. We stayed the night because we just wanted to be away for a whole full day. And honestly, having that community there that was willing to help, and an outpouring of love from not only this one friend, but a lot of the friends in the area, that was really huge. And I think that's honestly a big thing that got us as a system through. And actually, we spent the night there. Before I left that morning for the friend's house, I left Gizmo's cage open, just put it on the floor, put his favorite, like a little bit of a carrot in there, his favorite treat. It's just like, all right, hopefully this turns out all right. When we got back, he was actually back in his cage. I kind of think we all just needed a safe place that night. And he scampered away, and by the time everything had settled, literally by the time the dust and the wreckage settled, he was fine, and we came back home. We still live in the same place, and honestly, I can't say it feels completely settled in my mind right now. I don't think we're going to be staying here too much longer for a multitude of reasons. And on top of not really continuing to feel safe in my home, there's just all these thoughts that were going through my head, like, what if something had happened to my partner? What if I hadn't found Gizmo, and what if he hadn't gotten his way back into the cage? What if we had just left to hang out with Emily, and I couldn't find him? There's not much else I could have done. But what if I had never found him, and what if I had given up on him? And that was just a really kind of painful thought, is that there could have been so many things, that something awful could have happened, and what could I have done better? And that was just constantly turning through my head for a very, very long time. And in the context of everything we've learned about trauma and about psychology, in the process of healing, I knew that my thinking, my rational brain was just shut off. I was functioning on adrenaline, on surviving, and I know that, but your brain just turns, and when you come back down to it, you're just in the emotions by that point. And it's one thing to know that that's where you were at, and if anyone else had gotten hurt that you didn't directly cause, there's not a lot else you could have done. And it's another thing to be, to really know that. I think there's a lot about knowing that and learning it, but then you actually go through an issue like that, even if it's again, and you have to relearn it and reapply it, and re-blend that knowledge with the situation you're going through. A lot of people don't like to use the word integrate, but that's an example of integrating knowledge with an experience. It doesn't always have to be, fusing of different alters in a DID system. You can just integrate something you've learned before with something that you're going through now. That's an example that everybody does every single day. I want to tell that story, the reason I'm finally saying all this publicly is that I think that it's really important. It's a real life example that not everybody will relate to, but a lot of people will be able to understand. Not everyone's going to have all the answers, and sometimes even if you do, and sometimes even if you have processed your trauma, this might set you back. Anything can happen, and then you'll have to relearn, and that's life. Every single day is getting new experiences and processing them and what they mean for you and the narrative that you're writing for yourself. And it was really hard to cope, kind of combining thinking, or at least trying to think compassionate thoughts about myself and about the experience, and also just juggling this balance of stress and having to be responsible following up, talking to landlords. Luckily, there wasn't really a huge financial strain directly about this because landlord had responsibility for this issue. I can't say that it always went smoothly, but I learned a lot about my system and how we can all process trauma and how we can all blend some new experiences in. It was so tempting, and for a while it happened, to keep any feelings about this completely compartmentalized off, you know, and Hazel had actually, I think that some stress had built up, and I mostly, though, finally split as a complete separate alter when this developed and when these feelings were just too much to handle as I tried to go back to work and as we tried to be responsible. If trauma hadn't happened, that would be nice, but since it did, I just had to practice moving forward, and I just had to practice healing. And a really big thing for our system as we're going into 2020 here is building on the notion that sometimes you can't change the past, sometimes you can't rewrite what's already been written. As far as your story goes, the best that you can do is keep building your narrative. And I guess, that's the video. Even when your mind goes back to that horrible, terrifying life or death place, you can keep building. You can keep going, and it's okay to be knocked down for a while, because Lord knows that we were knocked down. You're going to be able to keep writing your own story. You survived it. That's all that you need to be able to keep creating, to keep going, and to keep building and writing your own narrative. I know I've got a lot, and even when the absolute most wild things happen and you feel like everything is just scary and it's never going to get better, just do your best to be gentle with yourself and stay together. You can heal, you or your system, depending on if you're one of the DID subscribers or not. You're gonna do great. Peace out.